Greetings, brethren. Happy Sabbath. Welcome to this Sabbath day, the 6th day of the second month on God's holy sacred calendar. It is let's bring this forward. It is the 25th day of April 2015 on the pagan Roman calendar. On the sacred calendar, being the 6th day of the second month, that means we are just a few hours, 7 days and a few hours away from the second Passover, the 14th of the second month, for those who will need the second Passover this year. The Passover is so important to God. It's the only one of the feast days which has a backup. 1 month later, after the 14th of the first month, God offers a second Passover on the 14th of the second month if you had a legitimate reason for having to miss the first Passover. And I'll just say this to any of you who missed that first Passover this year and you very desperately wishing to have had the Passover, join us next Saturday evening here on cogtv.org for that Passover. You can contact me ahead of time if you want to talk about it. But that'll be shortly after sunset in each time zone in the United States. We'll be running video of the second Passover. We'll have a recording of Mr. Armstrong conducting that. Now, there are certain things we have to be careful with during the present time. By the way, those halos on the screen behind me, I'll explain that in a moment. One of the subjects that I'm going to be covering today, many of you who tune in, you're going to say, well, I do that, and I'm in agreement with you. And great. And I just want to comment that you may feel like I'm preaching to the choir in some cases. Well, I agree with that. I do that, yeah. But there are some people, and especially one person this past week has given and is giving me a hard time about something. I say a hard time because they're misinterpreting a lot of what I'm saying, even saying back to me things they say that I said that I didn't say. And I mean, we're doing this in writing, so we can go back and say, look, I didn't say what you said I said, and what you're interpreting is not the case here. So I may be a little bit bold today, and those of you who, agree with me, I'm trying to help a person, and sometimes to help a person, you got to sit them down and say, look, this is the way it really is. So I'll be doing a little bit of that today, and I'll also be explaining carefully what it is that I'm saying that the person is misinterpreting, and it's a subject related to current world news that many of you should have. To talk about current world news, I'm actually going to start out with a quick news story from today because it's so dramatic, and it relates to one of the things that relates to the seals of Revelation that we are instructed by Christ in Luke 21, verse 36, to be watching and praying about, and to be recognizing, as Christ said, that when these first four seals become extremely active, he compared it to the branches of a tree becoming tender and their little buds starting to spring forth. He said when all that happens on a fig tree or in other places, he said, on any tree, you know that summer is nigh. And he said, likewise, when you see these first four seals from the book of Revelation, when you see them become extremely active, then know that the next seal, the fifth seal, the Great Tribulation, is near. Actually, he said the kingdom of God is near, but before Christ returns in his second return to usher in and restore the kingdom of God, first of all, we've got to go through the fifth seal, the Great Tribulation. That's a 2.5 year long period of time. And then following that, if we widen up the chart and open it up to the full 7 seals, you see the sixth seal following the fifth seal being, as I mentioned, a 2.5 year period of time. Then the sixth seal, it's no time at all. It's just signs up in the heavens, the astro signs. When I say no time at all, I mean, a day or two or week or whatever, short time compared to 2.5 years. It's just a transition. It's to tell you, okay, Great Tribulation is over now. We're going into the seventh seal after 144,000 people are sealed in their foreheads for protection. And then the seventh seal, which represents a 1 year long period, is called the Day of the Lord. Now, these first 6 seals are part of the day of man and Satan. And the Great Tribulation, some have misunderstood it to say, oh, this is the time of God's wrath. No, the Great Tribulation is still part of the days of Satan and man, and it's Satan's wrath. And it's primarily the martyrdom of God's saints. It'll also be the time of World War III. Let me come back to that chart in a moment. Let's first of all, let me transition back, and let's go out a little bit and go over my shoulder to the pictures there. Oh, we got this in a different place on this camera layout than we have for Nightcast, so I need to switch those. I've got them where I'm used to finding them on Nightcast. Where's the bear? There we go. We can go over into this shot this way, and then if we zoom in on that crown right in the middle, right here, we've got a summary of what happens during the Great Tribulation. It's a great martyrdom of God's saints, the greatest. It'll make Fox's Book of Martyrs look like a trailer compared to the full movie of what's going to happen once this begins to happen. It'll also be the time of round 3 of World War. It'll be the time when the 2 witnesses are out testifying. We don't know who they are yet, but they will very much be known to the world. God will make them known through the powers he gives them and the things they'll be able to do. And it'll be the time when those who are accounted worthy to escape, as Christ promises in Luke 21, verse 36, for those who watch and pray always. It'll be the time when the Philadelphia era of God's church, is taken away to a place in the wilderness that God has prepared, that he describes where it is in Daniel 11, verses 40, 41, 42. You can read that and you can see it triangulates between land that's part of the children of Ammon, Jordan, and part of the land of the children of Edom, and part of the land of children of Moab. All of that's just east of a waterway that runs between Lake Tiberias in the north to the Dead Sea in the south in Israel, what we call the land of Israel today in the Middle East. And that waterway just to the east of that is that great triangulation. It includes just a little south of where Edom is labeled, or in the area of Edom, it includes Petra. But it includes more than Petra, so it could be anywhere in there. That's the only area that God says is protected, that escapes from the overflow of the beast who flows over every area of the world. The beast being the Bible term for the dictator, the emperor, the 7th and final head of the revived Holy Roman Empire, who will figuratively or even literally, some wear this crown you see pictured in the middle of this slide here, this big gawky-looking crown of the Holy Roman Empire. That's a real crown. It's still in existence today. Oh, yeah, and they know right where it is. I've gone there and seen it on display in the Royal Treasury in Vienna, Austria. And it's behind a glass cage. I took some of my own pictures of it, got out of there before the guard confiscated my camera. I complained to the guard that, the sign says you can't use flash to take pictures. And he says, well, I don't know, it applies to other stuff in this room. You can't take a picture of that crown at all. We'll confiscate your camera. I didn't tell him that I'd already pressed the camera up against the glass and had held the exposure down for a time exposure. I tried all different kinds, 30 seconds, 1 minute, two full minutes, and some of those 35 millimeter slides came out. This is back before the days of, this is back in the early 80s when I went and took that picture, and I used 35 millimeter film. This was before the days of the modern electronic digital cameras where you can take a picture and look immediately to see what you've got, even see it before you hit the button, make your adjustments and take your picture. And anyway, I took time exposures, and they did come out. But somebody will be wearing this throne when this 7th and final head of the Holy Roman Empire is crowned in a coronation ceremony when the 7th revision of the Holy Roman Empire, when it's revived to its seventh head. And come on back out. Let's go where we're going today. So, friends, I got these halos on the screen because I'm going to talk about a subject that you should know how to answer a person. So even though I'll be preaching to the choir, so to speak, as I provide some correction for someone who's got the wrong idea on both what I believe and what Christ will be doing in the world tomorrow, even, and what he'll be restoring. We'll go through that and how it applies in principle today. And hopefully one of the people that keeps arguing, I'm not going to argue anymore. I'm going to tell you how it is, and that's it. And I'm going to stop any communication that may seem like arguing, because if you're not getting it, your mind's not open to God's Spirit. You can claim to be a Christian all you want, but if you're arguing with God's Word, and that's what some of you are doing. You're arguing with God's Word. I'm only presenting what God says and putting it in context with how God's Word puts things together and paints the whole picture by putting the crossword puzzle pieces in the right place. But before I go into that, I want to play you a piece of current news from today, and let me see if I can do this without crashing our video player. Good. Looks like it came up okay. This is a BBC News clip I have for you, friends, that will be showing video from a volcano that erupted today. Oh, I went to this slide over here, or intended to go to this slide over here, to point out to you that, let me bring it full forward, to point out to you that on the fourth seal, there were three things Christ described as, in plain language, as related to happening with this fourth seal. From the book of Revelation, that is depicted there as a pale horse upon whom is a rider named Death. Alongside rides, the Bible says, hell, which is the original Greek word Hades, meaning the grave. And Christ said in plain language, the activities of this deadly horse are loimos, meaning disease epidemics, pestilence, the plagues of Egypt. He also said, though, that between the third seal and the fifth seal, we should be watching for seismic activity, commotions in the air, gale force winds of all kinds, commotions on the ground, such as earthquakes and volcanic eruptions and tsunamis and wildfires and you name it. But the King James Version only referenced the word Christ used, seismos, that means all those things I just mentioned to you. Look at it, if you look in a good Greek-English lexicon, you'll see all of those definitions. But the King James Version only rendered it as earthquakes. Well, today's story got an earthquake for us, and Christ told us, when you see these things increasing, know that, just like the branches of a tree and they're becoming tender and the little buds on them springing forth, telling you that summer is nigh, he compared that to knowing the kingdom of God is near in the next seal. When you see these things increase, there's a great earthquake that has occurred today. And even though it's the Sabbath, and I would normally cover news stories primarily on weeknights, Sunday night through Thursday night on Nightcast, I do want to play this one from today's news for you today, because more than 500 people are believed to have died in this powerful earthquake that struck Nepal, wrecking many historic buildings even. The quake measured 7.8 on the Richter scale, and it struck an area between the capital, Kathmandu, and the city of Pokhara, according to the U.S. Geological Survey. We've got video of this with Danny Savage from the BBC reporting.
Some disturbing images.
This is the moment the earthquake struck. You can hear the terror of those in this building. The result was huge damage in the densely populated Kathmandu Valley in Nepal, leaving rescuers digging desperately with their hands. The earthquake sent thousands of people fleeing for relative safety away from damaged buildings. The injured were treated outside hospitals, which have been inundated with casualties. Earthquakes of this high 7.9 magnitude are rare. This is the worst to hit this Himalayan nation in over 80 years. So far, more than 100 fatalities have been reported, but observers on the ground say that figure is likely to rise significantly.
Damage is massive. The people in the capital, people in other cities have come out on the ground, in the open field, in large masses. I do not know how many people have suffered injuries, but we're trying to get the first information from various sources.
All right, friends, I'm going to save the full story on it all for you after for tomorrow night, Sunday night on Nightcast. I just wanted to let you know today that this happened today. Some reports are saying that 780 people were killed. One said over 900. And this report, I just played the video from you. The lead-in on it says over 500. So the count is not in on the numbers yet, but it's pretty heavy. 7.8 earthquake there. Pretty big one. All right, now I want to cover the subject that a little bit corrective for some. It relates to the news story that goes back to Ferguson, Missouri, some months ago, where I made some comments. And, I upset some of you. I'm sorry I upset you, but I made some references to it that relates to how we should understand God's Word and God's position on things. Some of you've misunderstood me. You've wanted to argue. And one of the last communications took a pot shot at Mr. Armstrong, and I tell you, you really clue me in on something when you do that. You tell me that when you're willing to take a pot shot at God's servant, you're showing a great lack of understanding. I mean, you can say Miriam and Aaron were the siblings, the brother and sister of Moses. So it was a family squabble when they spoke against Moses. But God himself came down from heaven and let his upsetness be known over those siblings speaking against their brother, whom he was using in a mighty way, just as God used Mr. Herbert Armstrong in a mighty way. So better be careful, some of you that are willing to speak out against Mr. Armstrong. That's just a fair warning to you, because God himself, not me, God himself can become upset. I might even try to nurture you and protect you a little bit and speak up for you or something, maybe, after I've warned, but if you're not taking the warning and you're not heeding it and you're willing to speak out against God's servant, Mr. Armstrong, and we, brethren, it's us who are a big part of the evidence of the apostleship of Mr. Herbert Armstrong. That's one of the things God says is a proof and evidence of his apostleship. The very fact that so many of us have been called. And even though we're scattered now because of a trial and test that God is letting us go through. Oh, by the way, I didn't mean to put that Nightcast thing up on the screen during a Sabbath service. It's just a filler screen that I have. But let's go. I got a bunch of scriptures for you on this subject. Let's get into them. First of all, I want to start with this scripture from Matthew 4:4 that tells us, man shall not live, quoting Christ. Christ answered and said, it's written, man shall not live. He's quoting from the Old Testament, but he's now incorporating it very expressly into the New Testament. He says, man shall not live by bread alone, but by every word that proceeds out of the mouth of God. So by citing that scripture from the Old Testament and saying it written in the New Covenant part of the Bible, God is saying I'm incorporating all of the Old Testament into the New, because I'm telling you, we live by not bread alone, but by every word of God that proceeds out of the mouth of God. And the Bible is His Word. That is the Word of God in written form. Now, it's the same. He says essentially the same thing in Luke 4:4. This is Matthew 4:4. Luke 4:4, easy, makes it easy to remember. He says basically the same, essentially the same thing. And Jesus answered him saying, "It is written that man shall not live by bread alone, but by every word of God." That's Luke 4:4. And starting with that as a principal basis, friends, we don't ignore the old covenant. Now, we do have to understand some things. And one of the things God says that upsets some of you, you've become upset with me because I quoted and cited this verse. And you've let me have it. Wham, wham, with all the words you can hit me with there, just about. Thankfully, you hadn't put any curse words with it, but practically, you read between the lines, it's practically the same thing. It's cursing me out. And I'm just quoting God. Now, I'm going to put this forward on the screen. We'll come back to this. I'm not going to comment much on it at the moment because I want to go through the whole thing first so you get a roadmap of where we're going with even mentioning this. In Deuteronomy 21, verses 20 and 21, first of all, verse 20, God says through the writing of Moses, "And they shall say unto the elders of his city." Now this is talking about, I'm pulling in on it right here. This is the parents who come before the elders of a city and say, "This our son is stubborn and rebellious. He won't obey our voice. He's a glutton and a drunkard." We'll come back around to this verse here later. Let's go on to the next verse, 21. Makes this very easy to remember. Deuteronomy 21:21. "And all the men of his city shall stone him with stones, that he die." They're not just going to throw pebbles at him and, ping pong. They're going to stone him with stones that he die. "So shall you put evil away from among you, and all Israel shall hear and fear." All right, like I said, we'll come back to this and I'll comment more on it later after we've gone full circle here. Next, let's go to John 8, verse 4, because some of you have come at me and said, "Yeah, but look, Christ, he ignored the old covenant. When they brought that woman in adultery, they caught right there taken in the very act of adultery, like it says here in verse 4 of John 8. They say unto him, 'Master, this woman was taken in adultery, in the very act.'" Now, why didn't they bring the man? If she was caught in the very act, then she wasn't there alone by herself. She was in the act of committing adultery with a man. Where's the man? These chicken heart cowards, they grab the woman, let the man go. Well, they tell you the truth. You really stop and think about it, they probably set up the whole thing. They probably knew as Christ wrote on the ground, they probably knew all the local whores in Israel, and they went to that section of town, and they had one of their guys pay the fee, and then they knew he's in there, and then they run in and grab her. And then they can testify truthfully. We caught her in the very act. Of course, we set it up, We had our guy pay her. We've all been with her before ourselves anyway. We know her. But you're going to hide all this until Christ starts writing on the ground the names of each individual in the crowd and who they had been with. Now, that's speculation, of course, but it's so, you read some things, read between the lines so strongly that you can go ahead and step out and safely in certain kinds of speculation, because each one left, it says, with conviction after Christ started writing in the ground. They were all convicted. What does that mean? That means they saw their name in the ground and maybe even a date and time and whom they had been with, and oh, yeah, he's written up my evil. And Christ was espousing a principle in law that's used even today. It's called the doctrine of unclean hands, which says that if you have unclean hands, you cannot bring an accusation for the same thing against another person. Okay, now, let's go on. verse 7. I want to just skip ahead to verse 7 of John 8. So when they continued, and it makes it obvious here, Christ didn't answer them, but they kept pressing him. And so when they continued asking him, he didn't answer him. He just started writing on the ground. You'll see in the verses in between verse 4 and verse 7 here. And so they kept pressing him. So he lifted himself up and said unto them, He that's without sin among you, let him cast the first stone at her. Let him first cast a stone at her. And very likely he had just written their names in the ground, because each one left after that. And Christ himself said, hey, where are those who would condemn you? He says, and I don't condemn you either. Go your way. But he did give her an instruction, a warning, don't sin anymore. Go your way and sin no more, Christ said to her. So he did advise her that what she was doing was a sin and don't do it anymore, because it could get you killed. If the Levitical priesthood were actually in full authority. I'll comment on that in a moment. First, let's go to Romans 13, verse 1, though, that in the New Testament, I'm making some emphasis of that, friends, because some of you are trying to come at me with things like, we're not under that old covenant anymore. Well, we're going to be. I'll show you that from Scripture in a moment. That's going to be very much back in vogue again after Christ returns his second time. But Romans 13, verse 1 says, Let every soul be subject unto the higher powers, for there is no power but of God. The powers that be are ordained of God. Now, what does that mean? Does that mean these police organizations in city after city, some of them known to be abusive and too much, are they of God? How can that be? That's not godly. Well, they are ordained of God. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean they're going to be perfect. And let's take it in order. Verse 2 of Romans 13, the next verse says, Whosoever therefore resists the power, resist the ordinance of God, and they that resist shall receive to themselves damnation. Now, I'll just say this without any comment on the fact of the character of Michael Brown. Not yet. I'm going to tell you the real truth of that later. But for the moment, let's just say whether he had been above reproach or not above reproach. It doesn't matter. If he had submitted to authority, he wouldn't be bringing what God says here. If you resist authority, God says you're going to receive to yourself damnation. And even a person that hasn't done something wrong, if they fail to submit when an officer is trying to stop them, to question them, the officer, God may allow it to happen this way. Okay, you don't submit to authority, the guy shoots you. Okay, so, there's some common sense that goes hand in glove with this, with following the instruction of this verse. Don't resist the power. If you do resist, you receive to yourself damnation. Now, there is certain wisdom that allows you to maybe not let them in to search your home and things like that. But if they're being abusive and knock your door down, they're going to do it anyway. You might be wise to just move over, because there is wrongful authority, and yet we are to not resist. Christ himself, I have a scripture we'll go through in a moment that shows how he submitted like a dumb lamb before the shearer. He allowed them just to take him without opening his mouth to the slaughter. But let's go through these other scriptures. Daniel 4 here shows how, even though it's ordained of God, some of the authority is very abusive, and in fact, as this verse points out, is the basest of men. Let's read this one. Verse 17 from Daniel 4. This matter is by the decree of the watchers and the demand by the word of the holy ones, to the intent that the living may know that the Most High rules in the kingdom of men. This is saying God rules today, even though this is considered still Satan's world. I'll show you a scripture on that in a moment. Still, the Most High does have the overall rule in the kingdom of men, and he gives it to whomsoever he will. And in fact, look what the last part of this verse says. And he sets up over it the basest of men. The basest means the lowest common denominator, the most rogue-like perhaps, the most, the basest of men. I think that says it pretty well, even in the old archaic King James language. And this verse will illustrate that if we go back a few chapters in Daniel to Daniel 2, verse 38 here, where Daniel's talking to King Nebuchadnezzar, and he says, "And wheresoever the children of men dwell, the beast of the field and the fowls of the heaven hath he given into your hand." In other words, you have dominion over men, wherever men dwell, over beast, over fowls. You are a world-ruling empire over all men. This was the first world-ruling empire Daniel is talking to King Nebuchadnezzar of the Chaldean Empire about. He's saying, God let you have rule over the whole world, a world-ruling empire, wherever men dwell, and your word over the beast of the field and the fowls of the air, over all the animals, is the final word. You've got the rule of it all. And going on in the verse, and he says, "And hath made you ruler over them all. You are this head of gold." Now Daniel was explaining to King Nebuchadnezzar the meaning of the great image that King Nebuchadnezzar had seen in his dream. And he told all his magicians that he was going to kill them all if they couldn't tell him both the meaning of the dream and the dream, because his magicians were saying, "King, just tell us the dream, we'll tell you the meaning." He says, "Oh, no. You think I'm dumb, that dumb? I'm not about to tell you the dream, and you just make up anything you want to tell me that's the meaning." He says, "I'll know that the God who gave me this dream is giving me the interpretation if he inspires you to have both the dream and the meaning." Well, none of them could do it. They were all about to have their heads whacked off. When word goes to Daniel, Daniel does a fast and a prayer with his 3 friends, and then one of the men presented to the king and said, "O king, there is one man who can reveal dreams. I'd forgotten about him. While I was in prison in trouble with you, he revealed my dream and said I would be restored, but as the chief butler, but the cook, he was going to have his head whacked off because he was the guilty one. And he interpreted both our dreams, and what he told us is what happened. He asked us to remember him, and I forgot him until now." The king said, "Go get the man, bring him before me." So Daniel was brought before him and interprets the dream. And if we back up here a moment, and I think we can shoot right up to the top of the where's the button for that image? Or we can go up to that image above me there. And this is a portrayal that was in one of the books written by Mr. Herbert Armstrong of the great image that King Nebuchadnezzar saw in his dream that Daniel interpreted. And at the end of this verse 38 we were just reading from Daniel 2, that very top of that image that King Nebuchadnezzar saw, Daniel says to him, "You art this head of gold," that was on that image, and that we just zoomed in on there. So that's what this verse that Daniel was quoted as saying before the king. Now, I've got some notes here for me. Let me bring them forward for a moment, friends, and then I'll zoom in on it where the print is not so small. Let me just read this first of all. When Christ was here on earth, he was not here as high priest. One of you have been saying to me that, "Hey, Christ was a high priest, you see, and he let that woman go." Well, he was not the high priest at that moment when he was here on this earth. He had emptied himself, and he came as a lamb to be slain for our sins. And even after conquering Satan, it was not his time yet to usher in or restore the kingdom of God. I'm going to zoom in on this where you see it better later, but God speaks in Hosea 3, verse 4, of a time when Israel would abide many days without a king or without a prince and without sacrifice or sacred pillar. And Ezekiel 44 is a prophecy showing the restoration of the Levitical priesthood under Melchizedek in the millennium. I'm going to repeat that again in a moment, but here's the main point I want to make for now. The governing authority then, when Christ was here on this earth, was the Roman government, which allowed the Israelites under their domain only limited powers to govern themselves. They could not administer fully God's law then. They were under Roman rule. Now, let me change that slide because I can give this to you in one that you can read a little easier yourself. Again, the governing authority during Christ's time on earth as a human was that of Rome, a government which allowed the Israelites under their dominion only limited powers to govern themselves. They could not administer fully God's law then. The Jews were under Roman rule. Christ was not the high priest, and he was not any part of the local governing authority that Rome allowed the Jews to have in the area during Christ's first coming, during the time he was living and walking on this earth as a human being. And then I've got just one more set of notes here to go over with you. When Christ was here on earth, again, he was not here as the high priest. He emptied himself and came as a lamb to be slain for our sins. Even after conquering Satan in the supreme battle for world rulership, it was not his time yet to restore the kingdom of God or David's throne here on this earth. God speaks in Hosea 3, verse 4, of a time when Israel would abide many days without a king or prince, without sacrifice or sacred pillar. Many places show the restoration of David's throne, and Ezekiel 44, chapter 44, is a prophecy showing the revival of the Levitical priesthood under Melchizedek, Christ, the high priest, as the high priest under the Melchizedek priesthood during the millennium. And now, even though Christ came as a lamb and was taken, to slaughter without a word, he did exercise some authority when it came to things like his Father's temple. As you'll see in John 2:15, he grabbed some small cords, made them into a scourge, and he drove out the money changers from the temple, the merchants. He drove them all out of the temple, and the sheep with them, and the oxen they were selling, and poured out the changers' money and overthrew their merchant tables. So he was a man. He wasn't a wimp, and when it came to things he needed to do and could do, he did them like a man should and would do them. But then at other times, before the authorities, he became like a dumb lamb, and he submitted to that authority, and he allowed himself for our sakes to be slain. And here's the verse I was making reference to about him going as a sheep to the slaughter without a word. It's in Acts 8, verse 32. The place of the scripture which he read was this: he was led as a sheep to the slaughter, and like a lamb dumb before his shearer, so opened not his mouth. So opened he not his mouth. So for our sake to be slain before those rulers, he just kept his mouth shut. And he set an example that we are to follow. And he told us in Romans 13, verse 1 and 2, that we are to submit to the authority. They are ordained of him, and they're here for our good, that we don't have chaos. But hang on, let's take things one at a time. Now, there is an example of the Apostle Paul written up in Acts 23, verse 3, that shows how God spoke out against a ruler before he realized and knew who the ruler was. Paul said unto the certain man, he said, God shall smite you, you whited wall. For you sit here to judge me after the law and command me to be smitten contrary to the law. And so then those around him got onto him and said, speak you like that to the high priest? And then Paul explained in verse 5 of Acts 23, he said, I didn't know, brethren, I didn't recognize that he was the high priest. I wist not, brethren, that he was the high priest, for it's written, you shall not speak evil of the ruler of your people. So in that case, where Paul didn't recognize who the ruler was, he essentially apologized and said, okay, look, I didn't recognize him as the prime priest. I didn't, and you definitely should not speak evil of the ruler. So he told us there's to be respect for a ruler. In Romans 13:1, God through Paul tells us that we are to submit to those who have authority over us, and that they're there for our good, and that they are ordained of him, of God, even though they may be the basest of men, they may be abusive, they may be like a King Nebuchadnezzar of the Chaldean Empire, world-ruling empire that'll run right over you if you give him any fat lip. Now, some who are having a problem, it's not all your fault. You are victims of the liberal press, as I've written on my notes here for this slide. And at this present time, Satan is the present god of this world. And those are the words right in 2 Corinthians 4:4. We'll put that verse up on the screen in a moment. And that god of this world presents himself as an angel of light, as 2 Corinthians 11:14 says. Now, like I mentioned, I'll put both of those scriptures on the screen in a moment, but I want to make a kind of a comparison here. Some of you who become victims of the liberal press might be kind of like during the early days of right after the recreation and the creation of man, when Adam and Eve were in the Garden of Eden and that snake slid up in the tree, and with Eve alone there, the snake said to her, so did God say you can't eat of all these trees? Yeah, we can't eat of that one or we'll die. And he says back to her, you will not surely die. And then after this whole scenario, it's kind of like, all right, the liberal press would be saying, no, Satan didn't tell her that. Or Satan himself might even be saying, I didn't tell her she won't surely die. I didn't deceive her. I'm not a snake like that. I'm an angel. I'm God. And some of you are falling for the deception. Eve fell for it, and she was deceived, and she fell for Satan's lie. You won't surely die. Well, the liberal press has tried to set up a certain guy, a certain stubborn, rebellious guy, as if he were an innocent little kid. They show you his old high school pictures of him looking sweet and innocent and not so fat, as his present pictures would show him as a fat glutton and pushing around a store owner. And then they try to even claim, no, I'm not the snake in the tree telling Eve that you won't surely die. They even try to say, we can't even tell for sure that was him, and there's a picture of his face right square on the screen. Of course, maybe the first video they saw was only the distant shot, but there's a close-up shot, and that's him. That's your Michael Brown pushing around that store owner. Oh, yeah, but that's a different situation, so we can't relate those two. Oh, yeah? Excuse me? There's evidence the guy's rebellious and stubborn, and according to certain scriptures, that's worthy of death. But, oh no, that doesn't serve our purpose. We want to present him as an innocent kid that got wrongfully shot. Now, some of you are victims of this liberal press. You're buying into that, even that lie that was, hands up, don't shoot. That was a lie. There are witnesses, and on the basis of 2 or 3 witnesses, you can go with it. There were witnesses that saying that people who said, had his hands up, don't shoot, was a lie. So you got, and if you got to decide, and there's witnesses, same number of both sides of it, you take all the evidence, and circumstantially, the guy pushing around that store owner, that does relate. And you have to take that into account. He's rebellious, stubborn, thieving, thug. Glutton, look at the weight on the guy. Just like the scripture says. But no marvel, they want to paint Satan. Satan even wants to paint himself as he does. He transforms himself into an angel of light, as this verse says. No marvel, for Satan himself is transformed into an angel of light. You know, how else do you deceive people unless you let them think you are the true God? You are the angel, of light. Here's the verses. I told you I'd give you both verses from 2 Corinthians. Here's 4:4 that refers to Satan as the god of this world, and it's a lowercase g for God there, as it should be. In whom the God of this world hath blinded the minds of them which believe not, lest the light of the glorious gospel of Christ, who is the image of God, should shine unto them. The God himself has a reason for allowing people of the world to be blinded for the most part, because it's part of the penalty earned when Adam, along with Eve, ate of the forbidden fruit. And they cut themselves off from God, and cutting themselves off from God, they cut off all of their offspring from God, except for a few that God calls now. And some of you whom God may have called now, or who claim to have been called now, who attended with us in the Church of God, who claim to be Christian, some of you are allowing yourselves to be blinded in the same way God blinds the rest of the world, because you are you're going along with the God of this world instead of believing God and believing His Word. Now again, I know those of you who are here watching this, I may well be preaching to the choir. Now I didn't want to put anybody's picture in there, but maybe we could have come up with some cartoon drawings, but all those little halos are like we got a choir on stage, and I'm preaching to the choir, and you all say, Steve, I agree with you. I agree with those scriptures you're presenting, 100%. But there's one or two out there, and they may not even be viewing this. I may give them a link and say, look, I'm not going to argue with you. I'm not going to discuss with you anymore as long as you're going to come back argumentatively. If you're not going to accept God's word at face value and put it line upon line, precept upon precept, as we're instructed to do, allow God through His servant, Mr. Herbert Armstrong, to put the pieces of the jigsaw puzzle in place for you, which God showed him how to do for us. And that's God's doing. That's God showing us who His servant is. And those of us who have a position or opportunity to be able to share with others those truths God brought to us through Mr. Armstrong, by having been able to have been at his college and been with him daily, more than the speakings he did publicly, and rubbing shoulders with him, getting to know him, sometimes him asking us to pray about things that he doesn't want us to tell the rest of the church as a whole about. I was in on some of those things, and we are to share what we learned from him and teach as we were taught, which I understand. Some of you are wroth and upset with some who deserve being wroth and upset with, who are not teaching as they were taught, and that's a shame. That's a real shame. Some of you ministers out there are guilty of that, and so those of us who try our best to teach as we were taught. Now, we're human and we may make a slip of the tongue once in a while, but if we do, allow us to say, hey, I slipped up right there. It was the Apostle Paul who, as shown in Acts 23, who called that high priest a whitewashed wall, or a whited wall, and then had to apologize and say, hey, we shouldn't speak evil of the ruler, but I didn't know. I didn't recognize him as the ruler. He was commanding contrary to God's law. That doesn't seem like the ruler to me, but now that you guys tell me he's the high priest, well, we shouldn't be speaking against a ruler. So, in effect, it was an apology, and one made by the Apostle Paul. Now, if somewhere I said, and I did, in a private message to someone, I said that Christ had done that. Well, I slipped, and maybe more than a slip of the tongue, a brain, should I say it this way? No, I'm not going to use that F word for brain. I don't want to use any terms that are not gracious in their way of speaking, but let's just say a brain fault, a brain short, a short circuit of the brain, and I just mixed it up. But allow a person to say, okay, I goofed on that, but here's let them straighten it out. Here's how it should be straightened out. And if you really want to know the truth, you reason from the points of truth. And if somebody makes a small mistake, let them correct it. And then both of you go back to agreeing where you can agree. But if somebody's going to come across and just not only try to disagree with you, and they try to do so, they try to twist your words and say you said something you did not say. I agree with you. There were abuses, even while Mr. Armstrong were alive, by some ministers who were not being faithful to the way they were taught. Even while Mr. Armstrong was alive, and more especially so since his death. But that doesn't mean that's everybody, and that's not necessarily the fault of Mr. Armstrong. God allows us to have free moral agency, and just like God allowed Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden to have free moral agency, God wasn't there to control them and say, slap their hand as they're about to eat the tree. He let them make the choice and do it. And then, to really learn the lesson, he lets them and the rest of their offspring, all of us, except for a few of us who've been called now for the spring harvest, he lets us learn the lesson of sin carries a penalty. And he wrote it up and defined it real well in 2 chapters that I emphasize a lot during Nightcast because they relate to what's going on in world news. Those are the 2 blessing and cursing chapters. Leviticus 26, Deuteronomy 28, where God starts out in each of those chapters telling us, if you diligently hearken and obey my commands, my voice, my statutes, my judgments, then I give you all these blessings that I enumerate to you, make you the head, not the tail as a nation, make you the lender, not the borrower. 5 of you will chase 100, 100 of you will put 10,000 to flight. I'll give you rain in due season. Other express specific blessings to you as an individual and as a nation. That one about rain in due season means no floods, no droughts, because in due season means the right amount of rain at the right time, not too little so that droughts produce, not too much so that you got flooding and mudslides and people being killed in those ways. Rain in due season, and that's both an individual and a national blessing. Even in your backyard, your own fruit trees with the right amount of rain in due season, they're going to blossom and bloom and give you lots of good fruit. And you as a nation where you've got multiple acreages that you're providing food for others in your own country and even in other nations. I'll bless you with an abundance because I'll give you that rain in due season, so all that stuff will grow as a blessing. But you don't obey me. In the second half of the chapter, he says just the opposite of all those blessings, cursings in exactly 180 degrees. I'll make you the tail, not the head. I'll make you the borrower instead of the lender. Your enemies will put you to flight, and I'll even, if you continue, after I increase these cursings 7 times over, then, as God says in verse 19 of Leviticus 26, I will break the pride of your power. Your enemies will really put the whammy on you. You'll have this wonderful power, but with your broken pride, you won't even be able to use it, as is happening now, where we would have many nations like Saudi Arabia that looked to us for protection in the past and just said, hey, we'll be cool with you guys. We'll love you. Now they are having to do their own battles, getting their own things up, and eventually they, being descendants of Ishmael, may decide, at the United States, those people, they let us down, and beside they are infidels anyway. Let's join the rest of them and let them have it. So, it all depends on whether we are obeying the voice of our Creator and diligently hearkening to keep His commands, His statutes, His judgments. That's where it comes down to. Now, those of you in the choir that are wearing the halos here, you agree and you know what I'm saying is true. And so I don't really need to preach that too hot and heavy to you. But there's some out there who have bought into the liberal press's way of presenting old pictures of Michael Brown as a nice, innocent little kid that got shot, had no arm and, no arms, no gun, and got shot by a white policeman. Well, listen, when you say he was unarmed, that big thug of a guy, a gluttonous guy, because he was way overweight, you can see in this video coming up here, I'm going to show it to you. Way overweight. He was what the Bible called, if your son is rebellious, he's stubborn, he's a glutton, a drunkard. You'll see the attitude of a drunkard in this video clip. You'll see him stealing, pushing around the owner, acting like a rebellious, stubborn son that God says in His Word is worthy of death. And it's like, oh man, that's not Christ. They brought this woman that they would have stoned to Him, and he let her go. Yeah, well, He told her don't sin anymore. And as we pointed out from the Scriptures, the Roman government had the local authority. Ancient Israel, the Jews, they had limited authority under Rome's authority. They weren't exercising. It was not a time for God's law, and Christ Himself did not come here as a high priest. He came as a lamb to be slaughtered. He was not coming as the King of Kings, as He will come during the second coming. And as Ezekiel, I put the scripture up on the screen for you. I think it was Ezekiel 44. That chapter shows us how, after Christ returns, other verses show us how David's throne will be reestablished, and Ezekiel 44 shows us how the Levitical priesthood under Christ and the Melchizedek priesthood will be restored. And those laws, a stubborn, rebellious kid will be taken by the parents before the elders of the city. And of course, listen, if the kid were to say, hey, listen, I didn't realize this was, I'm sorry, give me a chance, I'll go back here, I'll behave myself, and now if he showed a repentant attitude, then he's not completely rebellious and stubborn. He's got some redemption there. But you haul a guy before the elders and they see that he's rebellious and stubborn and unrepentant, out to the stone heap he goes, even during the millennium to come, the future time coming, when Christ has returned, ushered in and restored the kingdom of God, and the millennium is here. Under Christ's rule, rebellious, stubborn kids will be stoned again. Now, we're in this period right now where Satan is the god of this world, as we showed you the slide on 2 Corinthians 4, verse 4. He's presenting himself as an angel of light. He loves rebellion. He loves stubborn kids that cause chaos and problems and go against authority. And, some of you that are going along with this liberal press and rah-rah, the ones who are stirring up chaos, just let that come to your hometown. Let somebody come into your house, break in, and start stealing and pushing you around. Hey, the first thing you're going to want to do is try to grab a phone and call 911 and, hey, get the police over here, somebody with a gun to shoot this guy. Yeah, just let the scenario change and see where some of you that are rah-rahing all this chaos and lawlessness that's been going on over in Ferguson, Missouri. See how your tune, what song you sing when it comes into your hometown or right into your own home. But let's take a look at this, because some of you bought into the lie that the liberal press has been presenting, that this was an innocent little kid, unarmed, who got shot. No, he's a big brute of a guy, and his arms are deadly. He slugged the policeman in the face, tried to grab his gun, and, oh no, you want to ignore these facts. We don't want to hear that. We don't want this video played even, some of the parents were saying. Because why? Just like Satan in that tree, he didn't want people to know that was him up there saying, you won't surely die. He wants to be able to deceive people. So you'll think he's an angel of light, but he's a liar. These people lied. They tried to stir up unrest and disorderliness and confusion and rebellion against authority that was trying to keep peace. And sure, they may be the basest of men and in some ways and not perfect, and some even abusive. But in this case, this thing has been presented as a lie. Watch this video from BBC. Now I got to make sure I put up the license and the copyright notice, so I'll need to play it from this player down here. Okay, let's go to this video from the BBC of the closed circuit television from the convenience store where Michael Brown steals. You can see him stealing the cigars, and then you can see a close-up of him, his face, his fat belly, the whole 9 yards, pushing the owner around after he steals the things. He's virtually caught, and he's caught on camera doing it too, and people after that will say, oh, we can't be sure that's him. Excuse me, that's a close-up shot, that's his face. And there he is. They were upset that they were showing this because they wanted to present a lie like Satan did in the Garden of Eden. Oh, you won't surely die. They wanted to present this lie that he's a nice, innocent, little unarmed kid. No, he's a big thug with big arms, slugged the police officer trying to grab his gun. But he got shot in the process. Let's take a look at this.
That has led to claim and counterclaim. Police released the footage, stating they believe the man standing at the shop counter is Michael Brown, who they say stole a pack of cigars and threatened this shop assistant. Moments later, 18-year-old Michael Brown was shot dead by a police officer. But his family have condemned the release of the CCTV footage, accusing police of assassinating the teen.
You notice, friends, here the picture that the press wants to present. This nice, older, little high school picture of a little, much younger guy. Looks kind of innocent-like here. That's the liberal press version of what happened. And then listen to those that want to tell you, well, we don't like that video you saw. You can't know that's Michael. Yes, you can. It's his face and acting like a rebellious, stubborn son. Let's just hear the lie that was presented to try to convince people otherwise.
And now assassinating his character.
The events
he had no character.
On Canfield had nothing to do with whatever grocery store Michael may have been in or the person who was on the video was in, because we don't know that was Michael for sure.
Oh, so balderdash, you.
There had nothing to do with an individual getting down on his hands and knees.
All right, now this
raising his hands in the air.
See, here's the other lie. They want to tell you that he had his hands up saying, don't shoot. Well, the witnesses thankfully came forward and admitted that lie. But some of you, see, you've bought into this hands up, don't shoot lie. You've bought into that. You've bought into that picture of the little guy as a sweet, innocent-looking little kid. No, the real thing is, let's go back. You know, this guy had enough say. Let's go back to the beginning of this and watch what this rebellious, stubborn glutton of a son who the parents who didn't want this shown, they have some culpability too. You parents setting a bad example. God says you spare the rod, you spoil the child. You bring out the rod, and this kid, you can't hurt him. You know, in fact, you'll help him greatly to be a disciplined person who respects authority. But that didn't happen. So you let this guy turn into a stubborn, rebellious glutton, and here's what he does. Well, let's just watch it without the reporter. I'm just going to bring it forward, and we'll play it with just the video rolling. Here he is in the convenience store, taking the cigars. Now, I can understand they might say, oh, you can't tell who that is here. But, all right, the other video from the other side, same guy, same cap. Little owner, pushed the owner around and then comes back at him like, you know, you better not mess with me. I'm a big, brute thug of a guy. With his arms, he shoved the guy around. Now, he's armed. You see, deadly. Those are deadly arms. So you can't say the police shot an unarmed man if you really want to get down to brass tacks, because the way he shoved that little guy around with those big brute arms, that's a guy able to do a lot of damage. And he tried to grab the police officer's gun. He was going to shoot that police officer. And I want to stop this. I want to roll this one more time and stop it. Let's see. Looks like we hung up where he's stealing the cigars. But some of you bought into the liberal press, and then you're hitting me when I give you the scriptures from Deuteronomy 20 and verse 21 that say, a rebellious, stubborn son should be brought by his parents before the elders of the city, and that he should be stoned. And those are not I didn't write that scripture. So some of you that are saying, oh, you terrible ministers, you're just like the ministers of the old worldwide Church of God. Well, those who were faithful ministers of the Church of God during the era it was called worldwide under Mr. Herbert Armstrong set a good example. There are a few, it only takes a few bad examples, unfortunately. But, there's going to be Christ himself, God himself tells us that the tares that are among us, both in the ministry or the lay membership, are put into the church by Satan. And God allows that, and he says, let them grow up together, and then at the end we'll separate it, because if we try to separate it now, we'll harm some of the growing good wheat, some of the growing faithful members. And so Satan is able to do that both among the lay membership and the ministry, and God allows it. And so, yeah, there's some bad examples, but you can't paint the whole body by a few bad examples. Even if there are a large number of bad examples, you still, God separates the wheat from the chaff. It's God that does that. And some of you need to, unfortunately, you're buying into an attitude of a bad attitude, an attitude of rebellion yourself, and it's going to hurt you, because there is what's coming. What's coming is the next major thing in prophecy to happen is the fifth seal from Revelation, the Great Tribulation. And Christ says, if you're accounted worthy, you can escape it. If you're not counted worthy, you're going to be here during that Great Tribulation, and you're going to be asked to work on the Sabbath and to bow down before the image of the beast. And if you do that, then you've taken the mark of the beast, and then that subjects you to the rest of the picture here, the seventh seal. We go from the fifth seal through the heavenly signs of the sixth seal, then the sealing of 144,000, silence in the heavens for a half hour, and then one way of saying this might be all hell breaks loose as God allows those four winds of the first four trumpets, part of the seventh seal. The seventh seal consists of 7 trumpets. The first 4 of those trumpets are 4 winds that inflict all kind of damage. I've got that mentioned on our chart, if you can read it on your screen there, what the damages from the first 4 seals are. They're recorded in Book of Revelation. I just charted it out here to make it easy. And then following those 4 winds, then it really gets, it upscales. God upscales the trouble, because we go from winds to woes. Now we're looking at the 3 woes. The 5th trumpet is the first of 3 woes. The 6th trumpet is the second of 3 woes. And then wham, bam, thank you, ma'am, the 7th trumpet is the 3rd woe, upon which Christ returns and unleashes the 7 last plagues. Now that's the whole story. And for that, God wants to see us be overcoming and growing in character development, which he cannot give us by divine fiat. And, he allows the basest of men to be in charge, friends. Why? Because you might compare it like this. If you walk into a gymnasium and you're wanting to build muscle, let's say you've got, a nice, jolly, friendly gymnasium owner, and he just puts out barbells with no weights on them for you, so that, hey, you can have a fun day here at the gymnasium and go home and just eat apple pie and all you want and just, take it easy. Well, you're not developing any muscle at all. That's a nice, wonderful, amicable gym owner, but you're not developing any muscle. I'm just trying to make some kind of comparison. This may not be perfect, but let me carry it on through anyway. But let's say you've got a mean and nasty gymnasium owner now, and on every barbell he puts hundreds of pounds that you've got to lift, and you go in there and he throws them on your shoulders, and you got to struggle with this, and lift on. Wow, you go home after you're hurting for the next day, but then you keep that up for a while, and you notice, wow, look at the muscles develop here, man, boom. bulging right up, these muscles are. Well, by putting the basest of men in charge of the world, and we have to resist their evil and overcome, we develop character in the process. They throw temptations in front of us and trials that we have to overcome, and in that process, as long as we do resist the evil and overcome, we are developing character. Something, again, that God cannot give by divine fiat, and something that God wants to see us doing, developing character. Because God does not want another Satan in his kingdom. That's the bottom line of the whole thing there. He doesn't want Michael Browns shoving and pushing people around in their store and stealing their merchandise and not paying for it. And then when being confronted by a police officer, slugging him in the face, trying to grab his gun. And then having people lie about all that and say, oh no, he raised his hand and said, don't shoot, hands up, don't shoot. That's a lie. And that was the lie thankfully was admitted, but only after a lot of chaos. And people got hurt. And people got lied to, and people got deceived about that whole thing. And the point that I was simply trying to make, friends, is that we should submit to authority, even if they're the basest and abusive, and that the news is liberal and will tell you a lie, just like Satan does. He comes across painting himself up as an angel of light, and that this Michael Brown guy was a rebellious, stubborn, gluttonous son who should have been taken, now, actually, I'm only saying should have been taken before the elders of the city if we were in a government as God describes it for the Levitical priesthood times. We're not under the Levitical priesthood now, and so that can't be done, but still the principle is there. The guy was worthy of death according to the character. God says, put evil away from you. Stone it out of your cities. So the point is, that kind of action and character is worthy of death. We don't have the civil authority today that regards God's law or that practices it. So, no, it won't happen. But I'm saying because the guy got killed by a police officer whose gun he tried to take away from him, and that officer would have probably been dead had that brute, gluttonous, rebellious, and stubborn kid, if he'd have been able to get that gun away from the officer would have probably be dead now, and the guy would have taken off, and they wouldn't have known who shot the officer, unfortunately. But it didn't happen that way. He got shot. That scripture that God says, you resist the authority, you receive damnation, worked out in this particular case. And those who tried to lie about it, they're setting a very bad example for others. They're going to help to foster chaos and lawlessness. And those of you who are wise hopefully can avoid it. And hopefully you raise your own kids to not be spoiled and become rebellious and stubborn like this, but to be respectful of authority. That's the bottom line of it. Those of you that are seeing it otherwise are opening the door to chaos and lawlessness and encouragement of that kind of thing, and that is not God's way. When God returns, through Jesus Christ returning as the King of Kings, the Levitical priesthood will be restored under Christ as the Melchizedek, head of the Melchizedek priesthood, and the sacrifices will be restored. And when a parent has a rebellious and stubborn son, they are to bring him before the elders of the city, and if he's not repentant, in the millennium, that kid will become a pile of stones. That's what I'm saying. As for right now, we're in Satan's world. He is the god of this world. We have to resist the evil and cry out to God for his protection. And, friends, look, those of you that are part of the choir, I believe you're getting it. And probably the one who should be getting it is not even here listening. But if you run across that person or other persons like them, hopefully I've given you I've armed you with some principles and scriptures today and an understanding of my approach. If you hear anyone trying to attack and assassinate my character or my preaching or what I say, and they try to tell you I said something that I didn't say. Hopefully, from what I've said today, you will understand, I ain't buying that. Stephen Gilbreth did not say what you say he said. You just are misinterpreting and twisting and trying to just like they did with Jesus Christ. They came up with all kind of things to try to catch him. Include even that thing about bringing the woman before him in adultery. They tried to catch him, thinking, "Boy, we got him now. He'll have to stone her, and then he'll be in trouble with the Roman authorities." Well, he had a little more wisdom than they realized. He recognized that the government of God was not the governing authority at that moment. He also fully was cognizant that he came as a lamb to be slain for our sins, and he also realized that showing mercy is a good thing, and he knew they set the whole thing up. They set up the woman, and it may well be that forgiveness he gave her and his words of instruction to her, she may have complied with that. She may have said, "That's it, I'm not sinning anymore," after being embarrassed like this, and that man gave me mercy and told me to sin no more, could have had me killed. But he caught all them guys that were trying to set me up because they had unclean hands. They all had committed adultery themselves. And he also showed us that principle of the doctrine of unclean hands, a good one to keep in mind for a lot of things. Friends, that's it for today. That's all I'm going to cover here for this Sabbath. Those of you who did join me today, thank you for joining me. And let me comment, where I usually often play things from Mr. Armstrong. For a short period of time, until I have contacted Joseph Tkach Jr. directly, by the way, and I've got a written request before him to explain to me whether or not Joe Jr. and the corporation that he's over, the Grace Community International, GCI, whether he has authorized one Dr. Kenneth Ryans to be out there making copyright infringement claims against radio and television broadcast of Mr. Herbert Armstrong, and whether they're going to try to be making claims against anything else. And I can't tell you what's being drafted in the war room that I'm participating in with others and in counsel with others. I can't tell you at this moment what we're doing, and we're waiting on word back from Joe Jr. We're hoping to work some things out amicably, and we're also willing to go all the way to federal court if they want to bring an action against us for something that's on the war room plans. But we've got to be careful, and for the moment, we're just going to hold off on playing Mr. Armstrong. We don't have a problem. There's no copyright on the Passover service, thankfully. So we are going to have Mr. Armstrong featured during the second Passover 1 week from today at sundown. 1 week from today and a few hours at sundown, Saturday night. That's the 14th of the second month, and I think the date will be May 2nd at sunset. We'll be doing the second Passover. That's the time for it. And we'll be broadcasting it shortly after sunset in each of the time zones in the continental United States. That means we'll be doing 4 one-hour segments Saturday night, beginning after sunset. First of all, in the Eastern time zone, it comes up there first. And then in the Central, then in the Mountain, and then in the Pacific. We'll be running Passover each hour just after sunset in each of the 4 time zones of the continental United States. For those of you who need the second Passover. If you took the first Passover, you don't need to be doing a second Passover. Now, you shouldn't be doing a second Passover if you did the first one. So this is just for those who missed the first Passover. That'll be this coming Saturday night, 1 week from today, at sunset following the Sabbath. The 14th of the second month begins second Passover. So if you know anybody who needs that, you may want to let them know. It's very important to God that we Keep the Passover. It's the only one, as I mentioned in the opening, it's the only one of the feast days that God has a backup for. A month later, you can still do the Passover if you missed the first Passover, and you should if you missed that first Passover time. So it's the only one that has a backup like that. If you any other feast day you miss it this year, you missed it this year. It don't come up again till next year. But Passover, there's a second shot at it in the second month, on the 14th day of the second month, which this year is next Saturday night, following the Sabbath, 1 week from today. 1 week from today, a few hours from right now, and 1 week at sunset, next Saturday night, second Passover. All right, friends, I think you got it. Thank you for joining me today. I wish you a very happy rest of the Sabbath and a good week. Hope you'll join us for the Nightcast. I can put it up here now as I mentioned this. Hope you'll join us Sunday through Thursday night for Nightcast. On Facebook, where we promote it, we had to make a change. We had to change my profile page to a fan or business type page according to Facebook rules. And my personal page is just me saying hello, had a wonderful day, blah, blah, But my profile page, which is still there, but now no longer as a profile page, it's there now as a Facebook page, quote unquote page. Maybe they sometimes call it business page, sometimes they call it fan page. I don't relish the idea of having fans. I just try to, as a servant of God, try to present the night's news, relate it to the Bible and prophecy, and hope that helps it make it easier for those of you who watch to fulfill the instruction Christ gave us in Luke 21, verse 36, to be watching and praying always, and receive that promise he gives in that same verse, the latter part of that same verse, that you may be accounted worthy to escape all these things that shall come, which includes that fifth seal, the great tribulation. That's what he's saying when he says that you may be able to escape all these things to come, including all the terrible things that will happen during that fifth seal, that great tribulation, the time of Jacob's trouble. That means the offspring of Jacob. That includes Joseph's sons, Manasseh in the United States, Ephraim in the United Kingdom. It'll be a time Christ describes as being so bad that no time since the beginning of the world will be as bad as what's coming, no nor ever shall be, and it'll be a great time of martyrdom. You definitely don't want to be, that's a movie you don't want to see firsthand. You definitely want to be accounted worthy to escape, friends, and I hope that those of you watching, God, I pray that these wonderful people who are watching will be accounted worthy to escape. All right, friends, I said so long. Happy Sabbath, happy week. See you hopefully on Nightcast. Until next time, this is your host for the Sabbath service today, Stephen Lloyd Gilbreth, saying so long, friends.